everyone. So first I am starting off by using my straight edge toe clippers, and I'm just going to be clipping down her toenails as far as possible. Also, these toenail clippers are very weak, so it was very hard to like clip down her toenails with these, but I was doing the best that I can with what I had. But then I am going to go back in with a file, and this is a natural nail file. I can't remember the exact grit on it, but it is not coarse at all. And I'm using this to just go back into what I already did, making her nails as square as possible because that's the look she wanted to go for. And I'm just going to be repeating that to all of her toenails, getting it as short as I can and also keeping the square shape.
You see me do me dirt, 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 dirt. So me by that work, 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 work. Na, 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 na. When you walk out, na, na, na.
Using my drill on a low speed with a sanding band, I am going to be going in to remove any of the cuticle that is stuck onto her natural nail. And this is just going to help with the adhesion of the acrylic, and it'll make your toenails last a month, 2 months. You want to make sure you get as much of that dead skin off the nail as possible. And I'm just going around the cuticle area, not hitting the cuticle, but around the cuticle area, and then going side to side to get the rest of the natural shine off of her nails. Now taking the extra step, I'm using this cuticle bit. I can't remember exactly what it's called. I don't know, like I really don't know. I can't remember the technical term. I think it's a tapered barrel bit. Correct me if I'm wrong because I really cannot remember. But I am using this. You can use this on the natural nail and also onto the dead skin. And I'm going to be taking it in a forward motion and also in a reverse motion to get as much of that rest of that cuticle up as possible. And you want to make sure that you keep the bit parallel to the nail, that way that you're getting the full effect of the actual bit and making sure it's working properly. And then I'm just going to be dusting off her toenails with that, and then I'm also using this one. It's like a little brush to really get into the nits and grits of the toes. And then I'm going in with Gelish's pH bond and then following it by No Lift primer. And just one layer of each is perfectly okay. And today I'm using Soft Touch by Valentino, and I'm also using a size 8 brush. And as you can see, I applied the bead and then I'm tapping it into that cuticle area to make it as flush as possible. And with acrylic toes, I try to use like a medium to dry bead just to make sure I can sculpt it very easily into that square shape. And also you want to make sure you're like checking the sides to make sure that there's no flooding. Then I'm also going underneath the nail to make sure that none of the acrylic is stuck up underneath her toenail. And you just want to keep repeating that until you get, you know, a nice square shape. Also, I pat the bead dry. That way, like I said, you want to make sure that you're getting a nice square shape. And again, when I apply that bead down, I tap it into the cuticle area. And also, to prevent any types of flooding, you can hold the toenail on a downward position to make sure that any of the acrylic that is going to flood is just going to run back down the nail. And like I said before, pat dry the bead to make it dry for you to be able to sculpt. And also, I just took off the excess acrylic because that was just way too much for this toenail. And then I'm going back in and reshaping it. Here it is again, me applying that acrylic and then patting it into the cuticle area to make it flush, to make it look as natural as possible. And then patting the bead dry and also sculpting it into that square shape. and then wiping around the cuticle area to make sure that there's no flooding.
Beg you something, please. Baby, don't you leave. Don't leave me stuck here in the streets. If I got another chance to, I would never, no, never neglect you. I mean, who am I to hold your best against you? I just hope that it gets to you. I hope that you see this through. I hope that you see.
And here it is again, me applying that acrylic bead down, and then I'm tapping it into the cuticle area to make sure that there is very flushed area to make sure that it looks as natural as possible. And then I'm patting the bead to make it drier so that I can sculpt it into the square shape. Also checking up underneath the nail to make sure there's no acrylic under her natural nail. And then again, patting it dry and flat to get the crisp square shape. And you can see here that there is another bead that is needed because you can see through it a little bit. So I did go back in with a smaller bead and going right over top of that area. And then I'm just going to be checking my shape all over again, patting it dry, and then crisping up the sides, and then also fixing the tip of the toe. So now for her big toe, because this is a size 8 brush, I did apply these in a couple of different beads. So this first bead here is just going to create the square shape that I want. And I'm also going underneath as well with the big toe to make sure that there's no acrylic going up underneath her natural nail. For this next bead, I applied it right above where the last one was, and then I'm blending it upwards and pulling it downward to make it as smooth as possible. That way you can't tell where each bead began nor stopped. And once again, I'm fixing my shape as I go, creating that square shape. So with the cuticle bead, I split it into two just because this is a size 8 brush and her toenail is a little bit wider. So I applied that first bead halfway, and then I blended it upwards and downwards. And now this next bead, I'm applying it on the other half, blending it upwards, downwards, and then down the middle.
Nobody text me in a crisis. I believe that all of your dreams are duration. You took my heart, all my keys, and my patience. You took my heart, I must leave a decoration. You mistaken my love, I brought for you for foundation.
And just like I did for the pinky toe, now I'm adding a small tiny bead to have full coverage on her big toe. So I added it where it was a little bit thinner, and then blending it upwards, blending it downwards, and then also fixing my shape. And now I'm on her other foot. I'm showing you guys how I do my filing. I'm taking my drill in a high speed with this medium grit large barrel bit, and I'm just going side to side to make sure that the nail is all the way flat. And then I'm also sealing in her cuticle with this bit as well. And to make sure that the nail is flat, you can always brush your actual finger up against the toenail just to feel it with your finger as opposed to just looking at it. And you'll be able to feel little lumps and bumps if there is any. So now on a high speed again, I'm using this cuticle bit. It's a pointed cuticle bit, and this is to get any of the acrylic that is stuck in between her nail and the cuticle area to make sure that there is going to be no lifting later. And I'm just taking that bit and going around the cuticle area, and I'm also using this to clean up underneath the nail for any acrylic that is stuck up under there.
Yeah, okay, you need to get done at work, come over. We just need to slow the motion. Don't get out of the way to no one. Long distance, I need you. When I see potential.
Going back in with my sanding band on a medium speed, I'm just using this to extra seal in her cuticle area, and then also making sure that their whole nail is flat and that there is no ridges or anything from using any of the other bits. This is just going to help smoothen out the nail all the way. Now I'm going in with my hand file, but there's never really too much for me to do just to crispen up those edges and everything, just because most of the work was done whenever we were sculpting the nail. So all I do is go on the sides, file them straight, and then also the tip at a 90-degree angle to make sure that the tip of her nail is as crisp as possible. So I'm just going to be repeating those same steps onto all of her toenails, going on the sides to straighten them out all the way, and then also going at her tip. For the smaller toes, I found it easier for me to just go at a 180-degree angle just because of also how I was recording. The camera was kind of in my way of filing, but I still made it work so you guys could see what I was doing. But like I said, that's all I did, and then I'm going in with a buffer to buff out all of her nails to make sure that there's no scratches or anything that's going to be shown whenever I top coat it. And then I'm going in with some alcohol to spray her nails to clean them up as much as possible. And then I'm also taking one of those brushes again to really get into the edges of her nails and everything to make sure that it's clean as possible for this top coat. And I'm using Koopa's top coat. This is their shiny top coat, and I'm just applying a thin layer over top of her toenails. And I mean, like, guys, these look so good. Like, if you're not using soft touch, then what are you really using? Like, soft touch is so good on toes. But enough yapping. I know y'all want to see the finished look, so here it is.
My keys and my patience. You took my heart